Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our, I can't believe it's our fourth and final, I hate to say final, Blanca,
I know.
session of our Intel Education Leadership Essentials series. And today's topic I'm very excited about. Supporting a digital approach to implementing curriculum. And topics we're going to be covering is how we plan for a digital approach to curriculum, considering how we consider the platform, the delivery and access of choosing digital curriculum, and also evaluating content and tools. That there are so many out there. There is a need for criteria and in terms of evaluating content. So look forward to this session. My name is Diane Hauser. I work in Boston Public Schools Office of Instructional Information Technology on the digital learning team. And Blanca, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Blanca Duarte. I'm an Intel National Senior Trainer, which means that I get to work with teachers and leaders conducting professional development around effective technology practices.
And with us today also is Blair Horner. She's a project manager for the Office of Academics. Blair, can you share a little bit more about your role here in Boston?
Absolutely. Thank you, Diane and Blanca, for inviting me to do this. I'm really excited. Here in Boston Public Schools in the Office of Academics, I serve on several different projects, and several of which are related to the Common Core and aligning our instruction and our curriculum to those standards. One of my projects is making sure that all the new classrooms in the district have the materials that they need to support students throughout the year, and our Office of Academics Instructional Research and Development team has recently reviewed the curriculum and provided better alignments to the Common Core standards. And another project they're doing is adopting new curriculums that are aligned to the standards, and we are exploring a digital approach to using the curriculum as its open source curriculum. And then a third project that I'm working on is with an outside consulting team who's working with Network B and C schools on aligning practices to Common Core state standards. And we're just trying to figure out how we can use digital tools to impact more teachers and support them in these efforts. So thank you so much, and I'm excited to learn more about the offerings and also provide commentary from the Office of Academics.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. This is really exciting.
Yeah.
And next, we're going to dive into our topic, supporting a digital approach to implementing curriculum, because there is so much out there. How do you choose? How do you prioritize? What criteria do you look at? So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Blanca to get started, because you have to funnel through that so much stuff that's out there.
Yeah, and this is such a timely kind of presentation. If you had looked at the amount of digital content that was available 5 years ago for learning, I mean, and I don't know what the percentage is, but I mean, we are struggling in education to figure out what tools are going to work best for our students. And so in my experience and in my work, most of the schools that we're working for now are really in this stage of preparing and planning for digital curriculum. So I think it's absolutely very timely for your district as well, as you really consider all of the different available content out there, and especially open source content. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we continue. So how prepared are we for the use of digital content in our curriculum? Well, the first thing I think that we need to kind of think about is, in our schools, what are we already using? And I think a lot of times we come across a really great product and we see the stats and the research behind it, and we say, oh, you know what? This looks dynamic. It looks engaging. Maybe we'll just try it out and pilot it. And I think that piloting piece is so important, that there's a lot to consider before you should lay down money and purchase that content. But before we talk about what we consider, what we're considering, let's talk about the benefits, right? Let's kind of and I don't know that you can really question the benefit, because there are so many benefits related to using digital content to being able to address learner needs. But, students are using mobile devices, whether they're computers or their smartphones or their tablets, in their everyday life. More and more we see that children at younger ages are using these tools to also be more social with each other. And so there's certainly a benefit. They see a benefit in their personal life, but what are some benefits that you feel in terms of using digital content for learning?
I mean, I could jump in. For me, the first thing that comes to mind is really the engagement. It's engaging to use technology. Kids are using that all the time, and they use it for their own personal lives at all times. And to take that away from them when they're learning is taking a lot of ways. So I would say that just using technology is it's a great way to engage our learners to move to the next level. It also addresses different learning styles. There might be a visual learner, an auditory learner. We have a very diverse population here, as all large urban districts have, and we all learn regardless of where we are. We all learn differently, and technology enables us to be able to adapt so that we can meet the needs of the learner. Those are two that come to mind quickly, but there are many other benefits. Does anybody else want to jump in?
I also want to add that most of the information they're accessing in real life is coming from the internet. It's not coming from libraries and printed text as was before, and so this is helping them to get comfortable with culling through the information that they might find in their own free time. It also allows teachers to modify curriculum so that it meets their classroom needs. For example, instead of having a printed workbook with a small text box, they can modify it and modify the question and provide students some kind of scaffold to support them.
Absolutely. And I love the interactivity too in digital content. It's something that you're not able to do on a worksheet or a piece of text in a printed book. And that is that if a child is reading about content and they find something of interest that they're really interested in, maybe some additional information or an exploration activity, they have the ability in that digital content very often to kind of click on a hyperlink to learn more. And I think that type of benefit really gives the student freedom to extend their learning beyond what's required, in the curriculum. It also allows, I think, both the accelerated learners who kind of know the content or who can digest it a little bit more quickly. It allows there to be more for them to do. So when there's digital content, sometimes depending on the program, there are some additional modules. So it allows students to kind of go at their own pace. And if they're a little bit slower processing, they can do that, and that doesn't necessarily interrupt the flow of anybody else who's using that content, because they can continue on and they can do more with it. On the other end, you have your struggling students who maybe perhaps when they're reading a piece of printed text, they might be using highlighters. If it's a textbook, maybe they can't do that. And so again, the delivery of that content in a digital way allows them to use some of those annotation tools. It's not destroying the content. It's not, it kind of becomes theirs. It's a digital file, so they can keep their notes in it. They can highlight words they don't know. They can click on words for more information. So this ability to have digital content available for students, I think, is really such a benefit.
And also, one more thing that I wanted to mention is the flexibility in terms of accessing content. It's not just in a book, and it's in a book at your desk at school. You can access content anywhere, anytime, which is a huge benefit as well.
Absolutely. So we thought it would be interesting to ask you to reflect, kind of because we're in the beginning of this webinar, and reflect on how prepared you think that your school or your district is for this transition to digital content and curriculum. And we're asking you to post in the chat And if you're viewing this through a different medium, we ask that you post in the discussion forum. But what do you think, Blair? I'm kind of interested in your thoughts about, because you work in this area, very deeply, and your schools, and the content that you're evaluating right now. How prepared do you think that the district is, or maybe your schools are, for that transition?
I can only speak for one curriculum that we're adopting, which is the ELA curriculum in grades 3 to 5. We're calling it Core-Aligned Literacy Modules for Expeditionary Learning. And last year we piloted this curriculum, and we purchased the teacher's curriculum and the student curriculum for all schools. And this year we are adding the curriculum in the remaining schools, and we've opted to not purchase the curriculum, and we are finding varied reactions to the schools. So schools last year said, yeah, the curriculum was a waste of time, don't worry about buying it for us again. And other schools said, you should pay for my paper because you realize I'm just going to print everything offline. And then other schools said, well, can you at least pull out what materials are necessary? And so what I gather is that we are still very much reliant on paper copies for different teachers and different students, but there is a slow movement towards online access, but I think the pushback has largely been where we have to make sure there's one device per student in order to really make it a full shift to digital content.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because without having really a technology-rich environment where every child, even if it's not one-to-one, where there's access to a digital tool so that delivery of the content can happen, I think that that poses probably a little bit of frustration, a little bit of feeling like you're not ready, like we're not ready to do this. A lot of studies are showing that because of this increase in mobile devices, students perhaps are not engaging in the same ways that they did perhaps 10 or 20 years ago, when they didn't know what they were missing. That's what I'm saying. But we do have kind of this adoption of technology and BYOD programs, and so we know that children are more and more using these devices in school. And as schools, we struggle because perhaps we haven't had a chance to actually plan for the use of digital content, or even for the use of those devices. What do you feel are some of the biggest challenges? And we just addressed one, which is, a lack of access perhaps to devices, but what other challenges do you think there are in terms of implementing a digital curriculum?
I do know that a lot of people who didn't grow up with technology are used to handwritten notes and grappling with the content on paper and using their own actual mechanism of writing and the exercise of writing as a way to digest materials. And they found it a difficult way to transition online when they can't have the physical activity of writing on the paper and grappling with the content before they teach it to the students.
That's a good point. I can't argue with that.
And I think that takes time, because I can relate to that actually, in terms of I've seen myself evolve over time in terms of needing to take handwritten notes, and then making the shift to, I can't live without my computer and being able to have things electronically, to even furthering that, having everything in the cloud so I can access it at any time, anywhere, and with any device. So I guess when I think of a challenge, it's definitely that a skill set, but the time it takes to develop the skill set and professional development opportunities that are available to help develop that skill set too.
Yeah, and I can add also that, one big challenge that we know is not just the devices, but if we think about the kind of bandwidth that we need, because many times that digital content is being streamed from the internet, that's a pretty big challenge. Sometimes we have the money for the devices, but we don't have the money or, the time to upgrade our systems, our networks. And, it's easy for schools, leaders in schools and teachers in schools to get frustrated again if they try to use something and then it doesn't work the way they want or the content doesn't load up as fast. So, there's all kinds of different challenges really in implementing a digital approach. And we haven't even talked about the time that it takes and it will take, since you're kind of on this road, to actually look at your lessons and find a way to pull in the content in a meaningful way. How have you been able to do that now? I'm just curious, because you do have some schools that are using digital content, and you mentioned the alignment. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that process?
It's done in pockets. Like we don't have a systemized way of doing that yet, and I think that's one of the steps we need to work towards. So there are pockets of teachers that are curating digital resources, and there are pockets of schools that are doing it as a school. So from a district level, I feel like that's where we're at that step where we need to be doing that as a district, technology department in collaboration with the curriculum department, because we need the experts of our curriculum leaders and the expertise of our teachers who are implementing the tools, along with the technology expertise, that we can all work together to get to that next phase. So it's happening in pockets. It's not systematic yet.
Yeah. Well, the good news is Intel has spent quite a bit of time and energy in helping districts implement technology solutions. They have a resource called K-12 Blueprint, and that's found at k12blueprint.com. And this particular resource has toolkits for schools that include resources, checklists, in some cases planning materials, and success stories of schools who have actually gone ahead and implemented some of these programs or made some of these transitions. And there is a toolkit for digital curriculum, for transitioning to digital curriculum. I'm showing you kind of the overview, the graphic that we use when we talk about what that transition looks like. And I'll show you the site, and I'll walk you through the site in just a few minutes. But if we look at this graphic and we start at the left-hand side, very often we really need to think about and be able to justify the move towards any kind of project with a why. So when you're first getting started, there's a lot of research that goes on. There's a lot of talking about whether this is something that is really needed or not. And in this particular toolkit, there is a document called Getting Started with Digital Content, which helps you as technology leaders and as district leaders think about all the things that you have to consider. It's full of resources. It's full of, planning materials like that say that, you need to have a team, and you need to consider your software, and you need to consider your infrastructure. And so for schools or for districts who really don't know where to start, it's a wonderful tool. Now, of course, some schools and districts have already started. There's lots of technology actually embedded in lots of schools because of the move towards online assessments. That was kind of the major push. So perhaps you don't need a getting started document, but perhaps you are now coming to the point where you really want to try and embed that digital content meaningfully into your curriculum. And so there are tools like a digital content checklist to help you, look at some considerations when you're purchasing and evaluating software. And then, of course, our implementation, kind of where the rubber meets the road, you start to push out that, the usernames and passwords for everybody to use this digital content. There's some things to really consider, like, is it going to be a standalone product? Is it an app that delivers the content? And is that app able to deliver multiple providers of that content, or is it just kind of a standalone app? And so when you're considering implementation, one of the things that you have to think about is whether a learning management system that can house all of these different, digital content providers, whether that's needed in a district. In addition, the toolkits include case studies, success stories. So for a district or a school that's looking to find out how somebody else did it and what happened and how long it took, there are stories that they can download and they can share with their parents and their community. And then there's additional resources sometimes. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take you to the K-12 blueprint and just quickly kind of walk you through what some of those resources look like. And Diane and Blair, if you have any questions at all, or if you see something that that you want me to highlight, just let me know.
I did want to ask, in the transition from print to digital curriculum, oftentimes there's a licensure that we purchase that provides accompanying materials online, and we've had really low usage of those licenses, almost to the point where it made no sense to continue buying them. So how do we leverage those licenses we already have and help teachers learn how to take those resources and not think of it as supplemental, but as really moving towards core of the work?
Well, I think it's not an easy question to answer, especially because we know that schools are at such different stages of technology integration and even adoption of devices. And so, a lot of times when we're purchasing content from publishers, and for a long time now, at least for as long as I can remember, 7-8 years, publishers have always had some content available online, even if it was worksheets and PDF formats, right? And I know just from experience that some of my teachers would use those PDFs, bring them up on an interactive whiteboard, and then kind of do a whole group activity. And that's what they, back before you had real interactivity, maybe you were embedding videos, that's kind of what the interactivity looked like. And so, I can only speculate that maybe part of the lack of adoption is that in the past, teachers have not had like a real rich experience with that content, and maybe they feel like it's not really providing any kind of value.
And then I also wondered sometimes, like, how we make our purchases. I know we've had some experiences where we've purchased for teachers or for educators, and it's kind of like operating in a silo and then just putting something out there without having adequate buy-in. Knowing we might be evaluating it ourselves, but how are we evaluating these tools and resources with our educators, and how do we roll them out so that it's not just, oh, by the way, we have access to such and such. It needs to be kind of attached to training, embedded in the curriculum, so they see the benefits. So that's something that I would love to see more of versus us purchasing and making it available without the deeper learning on the benefits.
Right, right. Well, and I think one of the challenges too is even with a professional development session, if that professional development is a standalone professional development session that's done at the end of June, for example, for a product that they're expecting teachers to use in September, if there's there's a disconnect there then, right? Because they may not look at that tool for the rest of the summer, or maybe if they try to use the tool a month later, it's not being used in context.
Right.
Coaching, to me, is such a great way to give teachers a real hands-on opportunity to use tools, whether it's digital content or some kind of technology tool that's enhancing the lesson, with someone who has real expertise with them. So a coaching model, to me, might yield better adoption because the teacher then gets to work with someone at the time that that content is needed or that content can help perhaps, a struggling student or an accelerated student. The other thing is that sometimes adults make decisions without asking kids. So if I find a really, wonderful resource or some kind of, literacy program that has a digital component that I myself find very engaging, it doesn't necessarily mean that our students are finding it engaging. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
So these are all really important things to kind of think about, and in the toolkit, which I'm kind of scrolling through now, you will find things to consider, and one of those considerations around the adoption of digital content is, the involvement of students in determining whether that tool is actually something that they're even interested in using. On this first page here, you'll notice that when you go into the tool, you'll have a graphic and some additional information here kind of in the middle. But I have tools, so I have a little tab that shows me the tools. For most of the toolkits, the very first line item is a zip file that can be downloaded that contains all of the different PDFs and PowerPoint files that schools can use and customize, actually, to use in their planning. So I'll just kind of scroll a little bit quickly. Getting started with digital content is that framework, that planning guide that I talked about a little bit earlier. There are many of the toolkits have something like this. So if you are, whether it's digital curriculum that you're adopting or you're going one-to-one, there are some great planning kind of starters. This is where you start. The other thing that the K-12 Blueprint provides are articles around things to consider, like a learning management system. It'll give you some examples of them and why it's something to consider. I'm going to keep scrolling, and I see a digital curriculum checklist. So this is a checklist that you can provide to schools to help them really think through whether they have the pieces in place to successfully implement this transition. And that includes them understanding the why, them having a vision for how they see this tool enhancing instruction. It includes planning, making a timeline and being able to write down some short-term goals about, are there some metrics that they can look at so that they're not waiting until a year or two after they've purchased content to find out that most people are not using the digital resources. Because maybe you can use that money for something else. So the resources have been thoughtfully crafted, and they're available for schools to use. The second tab talks about success stories, of course, and very often, especially in our larger school districts, we have schools that look very different from each other, even within a school district. And so these success stories, you'll find rural schools that are transitioning to digital curriculum, and you'll find urban schools that are doing it, and you'll find, schools that have 90,000 students and schools that have 300 students. And so, this is I think a wonderful resource that really has a broad spectrum of content that can help, that can hopefully help people in your district.
It's a great resource.
I love it. I use it all the time. And sometimes people say, "Oh my God, I never knew that was there." And I say, "Well, it's my job to show you that it's there. And once you know it's there, bookmark it and come back to it often." So this is kind of a quick check, after we'd spent some time kind of talking through with members of the audience, the different kind of components that need to be in place. And I don't know if it makes any sense to answer it now, but, once you spend a little bit of time looking at those planning materials, I think in reflecting on how prepared you are for a transition, a lot of times we don't know what we don't know, right? So, adopting a textbook from, start to finish follows a similar process, but a different process, And so it's not the same as, these processes are a little bit different today than they were maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Blair, I'm curious to know how, like, what your response to this question would be from your perspective, from the academic side.
As we are, handling questions from various schools, I don't think we are that prepared, because I think some of the school leaders who have not spoken a lot about buying paper don't really understand what it means that we're not providing print versions of the curriculum for this fall. And so this summer we're trying to grapple with what kind of resources we can provide these schools as they adopt this online curriculum. And we also have 2 sets of schools now, the schools that have piloted it in print, and then now the schools that are starting it the second year without any paper copies. And I feel like it really depends first on the school leader and what is their vision, and then also on the teachers in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in those schools. And I'm sure there's variability within schools about who feels most comfortable with keeping the materials online or printing them out. And I spoke with someone this morning who said that she was going to buy it herself in print. So I understand there's a wide variety of adoption. Yes. I was telling Diane the other week, this reminds me of the 80s and the adoption of the PC. We all knew that we would get there. It's just how long will it be? And so we know this is on the horizon, and it's just when will we, what level of adopter will we be?
Right, that's a great point, because I was just going to say, when do we just dive in too? Like, yes, I totally agree with readiness, and then sometimes you just have to just do it to experience it, Actually, it's kind of similar. We started this series talking about PARC and the testing, and this year we all went with PARC. Some of us went online, some of us didn't, but I feel like those that actually facilitated or participated in the online version, that jumping in and diving in.
So when we plan for success, we also, again, because our schools are so different and they need different types of support, I think that's one of the things that sometimes we don't, we're not always prepared to do. That planning for success, right, means that you allocate resources.
Yes, that's what we're grappling with, because we want to have equity in how we're supporting the schools, but some schools said, don't worry, I have everything, I can do everything online, and the other said, please buy it for me, and others said, give us paper at least, because this is going to cost the same in paper. And so we're grappling this summer with how we will support them in their various adoption capabilities.
Yeah, it's certainly something that that you can plan for, but because the needs of your schools are really so different, it takes kind of that's why those success stories, I think, are so important. That when you are moving towards one of these initiatives, the ability to be able to see mistakes that other schools have made, or things that they didn't think about that, if they had to do all over again. It's one of the questions I always ask. If you had to do it all over again, what do you wish you would have known? And so I think that that's an important part. And asking the schools what kind of support that they need, which you are doing already, but you're finding that everybody needs something a little bit different. And I think that that's okay, right? I mean, that's part of being equitable. Being equitable is not necessarily ensuring that every single school has the same exact resources. It's being able to ensure that every school has what they need to be successful. And Blair, you spoke a little bit about the types of content that you were working with and that you were purchasing. Can you talk to us a little bit, or share a little bit about who your publishers are? How are you utilizing maybe some other Web 2.0 and digital tools? And then you said open educational resources, so I'm curious to see which ones you're looking at.
Absolutely. So I think it was New York State that worked with Outward Bound to develop a curriculum that aligned to their state standards. This was then later adopted more nationally and adopted to a more national scale and the Common Core state standards. And it's called expeditionary learning. I think that's really where it will be a boon to use digital curriculum, because we won't have to rely on extensive resources from the district budget, which as we see is getting tighter and tighter every year, but we can leverage more of the open source content that exists or licenses that exist for students. So that's where I would be excited to move in the digital curriculum direction.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Blair. And we may have had a little bit of a cutout. I'm hoping that that the recording continued to record. So this is a point where it's one of my favorite times actually of our sessions, because we get to share some of the tools that can help schools, can help teachers really find what they need. And we do it every week. We show a variety of different tools, and we talk about what schools are doing. And this week, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about graphite. Diane, maybe start us off, and then I'm just going to jump into the actual tool and show everybody how it works.
Well, actually, what I was going to say, this is a great segue, because when Blair was speaking, I was thinking about how I feel like we need to curate some tools for teachers so that they can choose what is good for them. And graphite, Common Sense Graphite, and Blair, I mean, Blanca, from what I understand, because I haven't fully was exposed to it on the surface, I haven't dived deep, actually does that very deeply in terms of, you know, you can choose a subject area, you can choose a grade level, and it curates tools that align to what you're looking for.
Yeah. And as you were explaining that, I hopped into the graphite.org website and right away clicked on Common Core Explorer, because I want to make sure that tools that I am looking for are going to address my Common Core state standard. I selected language arts here. They have math and language arts, and it looks like science is coming, so there's a section for science. And you know, this is such a useful tool, especially because we are really so inundated with really thousands and thousands of different tools that not only are teachers using, but that are really being created almost on a daily basis. And so here I've selected language arts. I'm going to pick grade 5, and I have the ability to continue to filter the tools that I'm looking for. I'm going to select language. So I'm looking for a tool that's going to help my 5th graders become more fluent perhaps in language. My standards come right up into a little list. I mean, how useful is this? And let's see, I'm going to select L51, demonstrate command of the conventions of standard language, of standard English grammar. And you see that there's 42 products that have been vetted by educators through Graphite. And Graphite is a product that comes from Common Sense Media, who is it's a wonderful nonprofit organization that works to create resources for schools and for educators and parents. It's the kind of place where if you're a parent and your child is watching a particular show on television or using a particular app, it will give you all the information you need, age appropriateness, you know, the information about it, what it is. A lot of times our kids are using tools that we don't even know about. So, or sometimes as parents, we're looking for a tool to help our kids. So this is not just a tool for educators, also a tool for parents. But I'm going to go ahead and click on this arrow, and my 42 products are going to show up here. They include websites. So a Web 2.0 tool that's on a website. BrainPOP pops up. Each one of these tools has a grade band appropriate for. So each one of these tools has a rating, and it gives a graphite rating, which is the rating that the organization, you know, selected teachers have given, and then we have a teacher rating. It tells you whether it's free or it's none. Of course, you can filter by that. And then some of these even have lesson plans. So if you are looking at an app like Punctuation and Marks, and there's a teacher who's actually used this to help our students with convention, you're able to actually see a lesson that you. So to me, this is a really exciting, this is a place where information is being curated already. And so as a district, I think it just becomes such a useful tool for you.
So I think this is a great supplementary supports for the schools. I know for our autonomous schools, they are free to choose whatever curriculum works best for them, and also make sure that they understand that it's Common Core line. So I love that it's already vetted. As for our traditional schools and those using the standard curriculum from the district, it's probably something that our head of the content area would also want to go through first and make sure that she gave her stamp of approval and this works with what they're going for. But I know that for our ELA curriculum, expeditionary learning indeed only supports only part of the standards that students need to have in grades 3 to 5. And we do ask the teachers to seek other resources to fill in the vocabulary needs, and because it's mostly reading comprehension and reading for informational text. And so this could be a great resource for them to find other ways that they can reach the standards. And what we use in our department is the core actions, what should be happening in the classroom to show that the kids have reached the standard. So I think this is a great starting point and gives the first layer of vetting the resources, and then we just want to have our content area, show their stamp of approval, especially for schools who need to use the district curriculum.
Absolutely. There's another tool, and it's also a curation tool. In this case, it's called Google Play for Education, and the Google team has worked closely with teachers to actually do some vetting also of apps that will play on Android tablets and Android phones. And then we know that we've seen lots of Chromebooks being purchased in schools, both to address online assessments and just because they're really easy to manage. There's an online console, so you can manage it from the web. And this Google Play for Education learning destination, we call it, allows the teacher to really have control over finding tools just in time to address the need of a struggling student or an accelerated student or any student. And the way that it works is for schools that have purchased Google devices, which are the Chromebooks and the Android tablets, they are able to give teachers access to the portal. The teacher chooses either apps, and the apps will be Android apps, or they'll choose Chrome apps. You also have books that you can look at. And in much the same way that Graphite does, there's this filter on the left-hand side where I'm able to pick a content area. And if it's mathematics or English, I'm able to then filter the apps by grade level and then by Common Core standard. So you can see I'm doing the same thing that I did before. The visual's a little bit different, and of course the teams that have vetted the content are different. However, for educators to really feel like they have some control over the tool that their students are using, and to be able to get that tool into the hands of kids right away, this particular platform allows a teacher to be able to, I'm doing a lesson on fractions. I have 2 kids that are really struggling. I need a tool right this second, and I don't have time to go running to the digital content that's in my my digital textbook index, or maybe I just don't know any tools that can help the child. That teacher then has the ability to very quickly, you saw how quickly I was able to sort through the information, find something that can help the child, install it on that child's device. And so there's this install button, and in the same way that a Google document is shared with a student, you can basically install these apps just by typing in the name of a student. the same way that you would, or a group of students the same way that you would do with a Google document. So that's kind of
exciting.
Yeah.
And we are a Google district,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. And I did check internally on our access, and right now, not everybody has access. So this is definitely something that I want to explore further. Blair, maybe we could work together in terms of having content specialists also kind of explore in terms of how we open it up to our teachers, because it goes kind of hand in hand in what we said earlier in terms of how we make things available for them.
Absolutely, and we also had a relaunch of our website, and we're actually having a relaunch internally, a soft opening, and I guess maybe this is something we'll talk to our content leaders about, having links, inserting that link where it's a vetted stamp of approval from them. These are resources that we've checked and we think are great, and I think this is a great way to start introducing that to teachers who are early adopters and school leaders that are.
That's great.
Sure. Yep. Another thing I just want to point out, because again, it's kind of unique. It's unique to this platform, is that a teacher is given access. And in some schools that I've worked with, it's the teacher that actually has full control of what's on their students' devices. And in other schools, there's usually a person, maybe a library media specialist or a technology integration specialist, that is responsible for vetting that content. And then, of course, it can always go through central office. So, there's multiple layers. But I think, at the end of the day, what we're really saying is teachers can have more control, even if there's a process in place where it's not them, but they can have more control. They can see the tools that have been pushed out to their students. They can take away the tools if they wanted to. If it's an app that's been purchased too, and this is one of my favorite things, let's see if I have one. If it's an app that's been purchased, so in this case, I've got Comic Strip It Pro, I actually have the ability to, I purchased that app and I'm a second grade teacher, and I purchased it for all 20 of my students this year. Some of these apps are reassignable. So I can actually take back the license at the end of the year and then have that app available next year for my new set of kids.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, pretty neat. So that I think is that's really allowing the teacher to personalize learning for every child if they need to, or if they want to, or if they can. But it also allows them to not have to worry year after year. Oh, that's such a great tool. My kids create their digital stories that way. It's really engaging. Am I going to have enough money next year to purchase it? So it helps with success. I also wanted to just mention very quickly, BrainPOP has a set of resources now. If you haven't seen it, it's really exciting. But their digital content, in addition to the movies, those animated movies that help to explain concepts, they have something called Game Up, and it is a section of BrainPOP that is free and available for all students. It's brainpop.com/games, and it has over 150 or so games, simulations that have been curated. There's that word again, curated, from other organizations who've actually created games to help students apply the knowledge that they're learning, for example, around law. So there's this awesome game where the student takes on the role of an attorney, growing their practice, and they have clients that come in, little animated clients that come in and ask a question. I don't have my visa, and I want to stay in this country, and XYZ, because your little scenario. Can you help me? And the attorney then, so the student, has to think about the Bill of Rights, has to think about pieces of the Constitution, and has to determine whether they have the expertise or not to help that client. Because in the role of the attorney, they have different areas of expertise. So it's such an awesome, it's just a great way to really get kids engaged in understanding the Constitution. And that's just one example, but something that BrainPOP has really worked very, very hard to do over the last year is make those relationships with those organizations. Another thing that you may or may not know is that if your district is a Google Apps for Education district,
We are.
you can connect BrainPOP to your Google account. And those assessments, those quick checks at the end of those videos that students take, they're like 10 questions. You can actually, as a teacher, you can receive the results from your students, and it all goes into one spreadsheet so that you can do, you can have the data that you need so that you can tell whether students understand the content or not. So for schools,
also, that if that integrates with Google Apps also integrates with our student information system.
Great.
So that could be a potential way to bring in that data into our SIS.
Right. So not only are people using it, but also are students actually, receiving the content and can they make sense of it? Are they doing well on those? Yep. Ensuring quality, of course, is really important too. And so how do we ensure our children have access to high quality materials? We talked a little bit about that in terms of looking at criteria around the different content that's available. And I don't know, Diane, if you want to talk a little bit about, how do we ensure?
Yes, well, actually, I'm actually excited. The previous slide that you had about the digital backpack.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know. We're in the process of developing what could be a digital backpack for the district. What tools do you think, Blair, we should ensure is in our digital backpack based on your background and working with curriculum and also some of the tools that we talked about today?
I think what would really be great is some kind of digital access to what we call our core actions, and these are the things that we're looking for in classrooms to show that the students are engaging in that rigorous CCS aligned content. So I think just making the standards very accessible and the core actions very accessible is the first thing I'm thinking of. I know one school had all the standards put on a key ring, so that was a very tactile way to quickly access them. But yeah, and then she had the principal had one for all the grades. But then
interesting.
The difficult thing about that tactile way is showing how you can have more than one standard addressed in a certain situation, and I think this is where digital content would be great at, like showing how the standards interact and the different layers and the domains they fall under and then the core action. So I think that would be the first thing I would want in my digital backpack. Show the interconnectedness.
And then I would definitely want to I envision the digital backpack to be a place where teachers could go and have access to the BPS resources for sure, like Google Apps for Education, other curriculum-related tools that we have already, but then tools that can curate others to meet their own needs and to individualize their teaching practice and their student learning. So.
Well, we also had a slide here, the ensuring quality one that I kind of went through a little quickly. But, part of the conversation about ensuring quality is that the content should align to our standards.
Right.
So that is part of when you evaluate that content. It's kind of one of the first things that you want to ensure is that alignment. And then just to add a couple of other, and some other features is, when I look at digital content, I want to make sure that it is multimodal. There's lots of ways to interact with that content, whether it's in text and in images and having audio files and videos embedded in it. Again, I think it's part of the process. It's, how do I find the best digital content out there that's going to address the needs of the majority of my students. And it's great to be able to have the money to just buy anything that you want and just, individualize to an extent where every child in the room is using the tools that they want. But but we also have to really think about, what are the tools, what kind of tools can maybe do 2 or 3 things. There's also familiarity with the tool. Once a child is comfortable using a particular tool, because every tool has a different interface and, is used in a certain way, I think that familiarity helps give that child confidence in using that material. We talked about planning for flexibility in the beginning of the webinar, and one of the things that comes up a lot in conversation is this question about whether or not we should use teacher-created materials or vendor-created materials. I'm curious to hear what both of you think are some of the benefits and challenges of that.
I mean, that's a great topic because, I firmly believe that teachers should and create content where they can. I also feel it's very, very time consuming, and maybe perhaps it can be their time could be more useful helping to curate existing content because there's so much content that's already out there. Mm-hmm. I just personally feel like the content creation is just so time consuming. That's my take on it.
And the vision of the Office of Instructional Research and Development is to curate the many various resources online and make sure that schools have what they need that's aligned to the standards and they can scaffold and modify to meet their student needs. And that is what we're working for all the time. And I totally agree. We're working at the district level to scaffold what we could need, and of course teachers can further modify depending on the students in front of them. But we take it as a service that we can provide to schools to make sure that they can spend their time crafting their instruction and their lesson plans instead of having to reinvent that base.
Right. I agree full-heartedly. Even developing online professional development is very time-consuming. So we just need to be mindful of working with our partners, such as you, Blanca. I mean, this has been an amazing partnership, and the word flexibility here in this slide is critical even in our work. It's not just going out there and picking something out because it's there, or going out there and working with a professional development provider because it can provide PD in something. It's really collaborating and working and massaging it just to make sure that it fits the need.
And something to think about that I have seen, in addition to teacher-created materials, are teachers who have worked with their students to create the materials. So just something, food for thought, something to think about. Well, I can't believe, ladies, that we are at the end of our webinar. The hour always flies.
It does.
And so, Diane, you have some really great resources here that I think you wanted to highlight.
We actually had the blog. We talked about the blog in one of our earlier webinars, and we continue to post reflection articles on our blog. So there's a link to our blog. And the other 2 resources that we have here are resources that we discussed in this webinar: the Intel K-12 Blueprint and the Getting Started with Digital Content Planning and Implementation Framework. Both great resources. I would like to add the Common Sense Media and also Google Play for Education resources in here as well.
Terrific. So those are things that, as you plan for success in your schools, these are certainly things that you can, places where you can go to get content and materials and guides to help you. We are at the end of our session. Blair, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Diane and I always love when we have company.
I know, and I keep getting the right people too in these ways. Each one was unique, and it was great to have you, Blair. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
And as always, Blanca, it's been a pleasure, and it's our last one. But I hopefully the collaboration will continue.
I am sure that it will. We will make sure that it does.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure. As always, we're out there in the world. You can feel free to find us on Twitter and reach out if you have any questions at all. And, I continue to wish you good luck and good planning, because these are all things that are so important and critical when we are, for the sake of our students. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.
This is a wrap. Bye.
Bye.